What jumped out at you? What was they seemed to honor head-to-head if they thought the teams were comparable. And to your point, they didn't seem to think Miami and Notre Dame at this point in the season were comparable.
I'm like baffled right now.
Why?
Because I actually really agree with the rankings. I mean, I don't have like a huge issue outside of maybe a team or two that might be slightly too high, too low. This rankings makes sense. This is the first time I feel like in an initial ranking where it's like, all right, I understand why they did that. That makes sense to me. They're putting premiums on how a team's looked, how consistent they've played. They are penalizing teams that haven't played anybody just yet or don't have a great win, a la Oregon, who, by the way, looks great, but they haven't played enough people yet to warrant a higher ranking. They're sitting 3 spots behind a team that I was curious to see who they'd be measured up against in Ole Miss. I just think they did a great job this week, and I'm like flabbergasted by it. So tip the cap to the committee.
So to your point about teams that hadn't played anybody, who's Ohio State's best win?
Well, Texas, who's ranked 10th.
Illinois is not bad.
Yeah, I truly understand it. To Joey's point, I think Texas A&M's resume, the way they look, what they've done, deserves to be number one. And I think when you look at Indiana going on the road to outs and beating Oregon, they even had an opportunity. I would have put them number one. I don't know if I'd put Ohio State at number one based on what they've done. Now, they still have road in front of them. But to Joey's point, Indiana and Texas A&M, I think they've done more so far.
Okay, let me ask you this, though. Who do you think's better?
So now here's the thing about that question.
That carries some weight, too.
Here's the thing about that question. And that's why I wanted to see this ranking, because this tells me that they're going a lot on eye test here. Because if we're going on rankings and analytics, Texas A&M is best analytically over Indiana and Ohio State, and they're sitting at 3. So they're going a lot off of eye test. And when you start telling me we're going off eye test, Rece, now all of a sudden we have no idea where this thing is going, because when you talk resume, you talk about who's their best win. But the Texas team we saw this weekend play Vandy. That was their best game. They looked like the Texas team
3 quarters.
We expected to see. They weren't that team early on in the season. They weren't for a large part of that. So when you say who's their best win, a Texas team that didn't look great early. This surprises me because it's a lot of eye test, and I don't trust eye test as much as I trust
I love A&M.
analytics.
I think A&M's a really good football team. They have win right now against one current top 25 football team in Notre Dame, which, by the way, is a great win, especially up there. I mean, goodness gracious, especially with Notre Dame having lost the first game coming off a bye. Like, you get extra points for that. But Ohio State, let's not forget that they also went to Washington and shut Washington down to give them their first loss of the season. So we cannot remove that.
All of
from
that
the
is
equation
baked into the analytics.
And I also think if we're going exclusively on eye test, who's the team I'd least like to play? It's Indiana right now. I think Indiana right now, offensively
Everything you
and
said, though, is
defensively,
baked into the analytics that still has Texas A&M above both those teams.
Here's one thing that I let slip by just a little bit. The cut line would be a little bit different right now because you have the 5 highest ranked conference champions got fixated on the Memphis angle of it. Virginia would actually be in the field as the 4th highest ranked conference champion because they at the moment are the highest ranked team from the ACC. So you'd move the cut line up another spot.
And another thing that we can look at here with what happened right now in the ACC with Georgia Tech losing and Miami losing, it's safe to assume they have their work cut out for them to get 2 teams in. I think that is likely not happening. Now the Big 12. There's some legitimate wiggle room there because you still have Utah that's lingering. You still have Texas Tech and BYU, which will settle itself this weekend potentially. I mean, there's some wiggle room in the Big 12 to get 2 in.
Or more, because you have Texas and Oklahoma, too, sitting there about to play Georgia and Alabama, so they could hurt their causes, too. Mac Rhodes, who is the chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, joined us now. Mac, we talked a little bit earlier, right before the show, about the new enhanced metrics that the committee is using, the difference in the way strength of schedule is evaluated, and for the first time, the metric you were calling record strength. How well did you play against your schedule? Given those metrics, who did that have the biggest impact on in terms of evaluation, the new enhanced version of the metrics?
Well, one, great to be with you, Rece, and Booger and Greg and Joey. And Greg, by the way, I agree completely with you. But to your question, Rece, for example, it came up when we talked about Oregon. And Oregon, when you look at them in the top 10, are lowest ranked in terms of record strength. And so the committee had a lot of conversation, rigorous debate, conversation about, Oregon as a team. And, we're blessed to have 3 coaches in the room. and looking at the tape. And when you looked at Oregon, great players at the skill position, felt that they're really, really good up front, both sides of the ball. Their one loss is to our number 2 ranked team, Indiana. And so again, when we looked and evaluated Oregon, we really looked, in terms of just quality of team and how they looked on film.
Okay, so Oregon's only loss is to Indiana. So let's talk a little bit about the 3 highest ranked teams. Joey's pointed out many of the metrics, assuming they mirror what was in the room, would favor Texas A&M. I think all of us who watched Ohio State and Indiana play, it's hard to argue with them. How did the metrics weigh against the football judgment in the room of watching those 2 teams from the Big Ten play?
Yeah, we had, robust discussion about the 3 of them. Obviously, all 3 undefeated. We had great discussion about them on Monday. We certainly came back today. We really, really felt like the committee that Ohio State and Indiana were close. When you looked at the statistical data, both offensively and defensively, 2 teams, both in the top 5 offensively, 2 teams, both in the top 5 defensively, both with really, really good wins. Ohio State, a win against Washington and certainly against Texas. Indiana, a win against Oregon and Iowa. But when we again looked at tape, we looked at metrics, we felt like, Ohio State a little bit better up front on the offensive line, and we thought they were better defensively. And then when we looked at, statistics and we included Texas A&M as part of the discussion, again, we just felt like the separator there was defensively. And that those 2 teams, both Ohio State and Indiana, were better defensively. So you're talking about 3 great teams, 3 deserving teams, and we really had, again, great discussion, great debate about the 3.
You've got several. You've got a handful of 1-loss teams ranked above an undefeated BYU. You have some 2-loss teams ranked ahead of 1-loss teams. How cognizant is the discussion in the room at sort of getting away from what has really been part of the DNA of evaluating college football teams for more than a century of, well, they're undefeated. Well, they have fewer losses. Everybody has a tough time playing the schedule. How cognizant is the committee of not just counting losses?
Yeah, I think it's always part of the discussion when we're talking about wins and losses. That's extremely important. But again, we have a variety of tools at our disposal, and so not one is weighted more than the other. We're sitting here and we're looking at head-to-head. We're looking at common opponent. We're looking at schedule strength. We're looking at record strength. We're looking at all of the analytics, and so we truly try to look at each team on its own and its body of work. And I think that's why we wait as a committee, CFP, to begin our rankings, at this point in time of the year where we've got a body of work that we can look at for each of the teams.
Mac, we appreciate your time. We'll do it next week. I'm sure everything will go just as predicted, and this will be easy for you next week. We appreciate it, man.
Thank you all.
All right, that is Mac Rhoades. He is the new chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. This is what the 12-team bracket would look like if this were Selection Day, but it most certainly is not.